Sometimes things must be pruned so that new life can grow. The dead tufts of hydrangea blossoms, the old wood of a raspberry bush, the mossy branch of the dogwood. Sometimes you have to take a big risk, whether it pays off or not, to see if things will be better off different. Hacking something back, hoping for the best. The resilience of nature will surprise you and inform you of your own resilience. Welcome to Games in the Glade, a stress-free gaming news and reviews podcast. I am your host, Tina, and today I'll tell you about two games I think you'd enjoy. The first is a beautiful watercolor narrative-driven game called Dordogne, and the second is a fascinating puzzle-forward game called COCOON. I'd also like to ask you about your favorite puzzle games or your favorite or most memorable puzzles from games you've played. And finally, I'll be thanking you so much for your support throughout these years and letting you know what's to come of the podcast. First up, Dordogne, developed by the French studio Je ne sais quoi and published in June of last year. I played Dordogne for the podcast's Patreon, and you can find the playlist of that playthrough uploaded here on YouTube. First off, I would like to thank the developers and the publishers of the game so much for the key, so thank you all so much. Mimi, the protagonist of Dordogne, is told time and again by her grandmother Nora that places, objects, and people have many lives. Dordogne is a game about exploring those many lives of the places, objects, and people in the riverside community of Dordogne, France. Once Mimi vacationed there as a child, reluctantly and then enthusiastically getting to know her grandmother, Nora, the Couleuvre River, the marketplace, and a peculiar young boy named Renaud. Now, as a young adult, Mimi returns to clear out her estranged grandmother's estate after her passing, sifting through the things that Nora kept and rediscovering Mimi's own memories of that faithful summertime visit. The most stunning thing about Dordogne is the visuals. The game is largely made of watercolor illustrations, hand-painted by Cedric Babouche, who is the lead game developer, and then scanned into the game. So, the land that you walk on, the river that laps at the sandy beach, the city in the distance, even the little hand basket that your grandmother is carrying around, they all rest together in the scene as if they are pouring forward from the same storybook. The unique method of portraying the world through watercolor contributes to the hazy feel of a childhood memory, where some of the details are filled in, but the rest is implied. People, places, and things extend into the distance in a blur, but the main characters are rendered vibrantly and dynamically as the action revolves around them. The music of Dordogne is also very dreamlike and ethereal. The soundtrack has a very unique tone to it, including a lot of instruments that I really wouldn't expect from a game about 1970s France. There's dreamy synthy echoes in Pink Shores, or the artificial choirs in Mimi, even the frantic tapping percussion in Run Boy. Yet in all of these, there is still a sense of something receding like a memory or a dream. Something being just out of reach. Often the main melody will fade in and out of a song, muffling or even just stepping aside for another motif to play. One thing I really enjoyed about Dordogne was the ability to combine words that you pick up by observing your environment and creating a poem from them to remember the day. It captures a very childlike sense of wonder, a whimsical way of seeing the world. As a child, and honestly even as an adult, sometimes a word makes an impression on you, and having it then stamped into the environment makes this indelible connection between sensory experience, memory, and language that makes a summer vacation unforgettable. Through Mimi's composed poems, you get to leave your own impression on how you think she felt that day. You can focus on maybe the scary parts of the day, or things she messed up on, or even things she didn't get to do, or you can focus on the positive side of things. See the sunshine on the rocks in the river, the smile on Renaud's face as you sing together in his secret hideout, far away from his unkind parents. The main story of Dordogne that you explore as young Mimi is that of a child struggling to be comfortable on a vacation with her widowed grandmother. Mimi is learning about the world as she goes, learning rules and then breaking them, playing with and creating art. But through her encounters with Renaud, a young, neglected boy who Mimi's own grandfather fought hard to protect, Mimi learns that there's really only so much a child can do, only so much a child could be responsible for. Both in the sense that it's not really within Mimi's power to restore the relationship between Renaud and her own grandmother Nora, although eventually she does so with a near-death experience, but also in the sense that the onus for Mimi's grandfather's death can't really be placed on a child just because her grandpa helped him from the kindness of his heart. Renaud is not responsible for this man's death just because he had fought hard for Renaud during his life. There are some things that one cannot truly understand as a child that take time to really process. Mimi doesn't get the full story of Nora or her grandfather or Renaud until she returns to her grandmother's house to go through the things, and she finds letters about her grandfather's struggles. He was trying to, all that time, separate Renaud from his family because they were wielding their religion against Renaud like a cudgel. Then her grandfather, as you find out through the letters and tapes that are left throughout the game, lost his job and was ostracized from his community just for trying to get this child to safety. Nora's bitterness towards Renaud only makes sense through this lens, because as we see through young Mimi's experiences, Nora is such a loving woman and so widely loved by the community. She spends her time very freely and joyfully with people. So that she would have so much animosity towards Renaud seems like an impossibility. Thankfully, the game's end lays bare the truth. Nora and Renaud grow close together in Mimi's absence after Mimi returns to her parents in the States, and Renaud takes care of Nora in her old age. The two become dear friends after that near-death experience that Mimi had. In that, it feels like Dordogne has become complete. The community has healed itself through Nora and Renaud bridging the gap. The people, places, things, all these lives of Dordogne are steeped in love, and thankfully, Mimi's able to hold on to that love as she keeps Nora's home instead of allowing the memories to fade with time. Next up, Cocoon, made by Geometric Interactive and directed by Jeppe Carlsen, who designed indie sensations Limbo and Inside. Cocoon is my favorite gaming experience thus far of 2024. It combines unique world traversal with clever puzzles in a way I've honestly never seen done before. From the environments, to the moment-to-moment gameplay, to the haunting music, Cocoon drew me in and kept me wanting to play, all throughout its concise but impactful scope. Let's start with the puzzles for Cocoon. Each puzzle is embedded in the environment, and each environment is a piece of a greater puzzle. This is the main thrust of the game, this infinite feedback loop between where you are and what you can do with where you are. Primarily, you solve puzzles by placing an orb in a required slot, moving through obstacles without leaving what you're carrying behind. You might, for instance, be stopped by a gooey security latch that tries to snatch a key that you're carrying, and then it places it behind you, pushing you to think of ways to get through those checkpoints. Or you might have another creature try and take your orb from you, so you have to find a way to get past them without their notice. Your goal, ultimately, is to carry as many orbs with you as possible. But you are just one little creature. You can only carry one thing at a time. Therefore, you have to nest your things within one another. Which is easy, because each orb in Cocoon, each puzzle piece, is an environment, a world in and of itself. This is where I feel like Cocoon transcends a simple pick thing up, put it here, make progress kind of pattern. It's not just that you need to put an object in a right place. That object is already a place in and of itself. Each orb is a world, and each world has its own theme, and each orb possesses the power to do something different when you interact with it. The first orb that you collect, the orange orb, lets you see hidden pathways beneath you when you carry it. Its world is a warm, dry ravine with striated mesas, ruled over by a wasp and its many progeny. The green orb lets you move up and down transparent vertical columns that solidify as you ascend them. The world of the green orb is lush and watery, filled with plant life and home to a large starfish-like aquatic creature who guards the gate back to the machine-filled hub world. The purple orb can be placed in one area and then plucked and regenerated from any one of several mushrooms in the environment, essentially teleporting from one place to the next. Its home is a pulsing landscape of flesh and machinery, fibrous and sinewy, where three conjoined triplets form one lordly foe. And the white orb can be placed into a dock to fire a blast of light out. Its world is dark and metallic, but filled with reflective surfaces. The environments in Cocoon are so compelling. They're equal parts synthetic and organic, insect and plant, machine and living, familiar and alien. They're all combined in a way that I've never seen before. To progress, you explore each world as best as you can with your limited abilities, and then you return to each world when you gain more abilities through the other worlds. It's kind of hard to phrase because it's not like you ever level up, or you're not really granted magical abilities that persist by these orbs. You're always going to have to hold something or use something to have its power. But with the right orb in hand, you can solve anything. You can leap into a world, explore it inside that orb, and you can also take other worlds and orbs into that world to solve puzzles and unlock progress within and without that world. In the green world where those gooey security latches are, you'll need to bring in the orange world to make those latches start to move. Then, if you briefly leave the green world, then hop back in, you can preserve the key that you're carrying as the gooey traps move behind you. Leaping back and forth between worlds, carrying worlds within one another, using the power of one world to solve the problem of another, these are all fairly simple concepts, but when they're combined together, they inspire creative thinking. The overall effect is electrifying. The puzzles made me feel like a genius when I solved them. They were somehow just the right difficulty. Nothing was ever so difficult that I had to spend hours on it, but each puzzle plays with what you know and what you don't yet know that you can do with your orb. I found it really interesting how there's no tutorials in the game, no words on the screen to tell you that you can push this button to make something happen, or you can drop your orb in midair. It's just experimentation, and the game never does anything more punishing than setting you back to a checkpoint that's just a few paces away, or jettisoning you out of the world to a place where you can just hop right back into a boss fight if you, for instance, get damaged by a boss. Most of the time, if you do something wrong, nothing will happen at all if you're just solving a puzzle. But when you do something right, you will know. You can make progress immediately and move forward, and also a little otherworldly pleasant motif plays in the background. Learning how the game works through doing the puzzles themselves and applying those concepts, turning them on their head, was so rewarding. And the game is all puzzles all the way down. Even the boss fights are puzzles. Rather than attack a boss directly, you have to find out how to use a kind of orb-like element of their environment to damage them a few times while dodging their attacks. There's a tension in these encounters because you don't want to get hit. That'll knock you out of the world and set you back to the beginning of the encounter. But the pacing of the fights is still very pleasant. Each boss has a few phases, each of which introduce a new element to their pattern of attack and movement to keep you on your toes. And I just love the drama of these fights because you have these big creatures and this big tense fight, and you're just this little guy who can't actually hurt them. So your prize for victory is progress, of course, and a new orb with a new power now rests in your possession. The whole game is about a beautiful and strange universe, and your odd part as a collector in it. Your buggy little robot character goes from world to world, carrying an orb on its back like a tiny atlas. You're hoarding these orbs in a way, taking them from their own worlds and bringing them to another place until you finally have enough. Or maybe too much. You become just like the very same bosses you fought, possessive, possessing, and possessed by your precious orbs. And while this might seem like a bad thing, getting trapped in a cycle of endless orb hoarding, I saw it more like participating in the ecosystem of the worlds. Somebody's gotta have the orbs and somebody's gotta take them. You don't have the orbs when you first see them. The boss of that world makes that very apparent as it lords over the orb and leaps into it, awaiting for your challenge. And because you don't have that world, you gotta go take it. And then when you have it, someone has to take it from you. You get so that you can give. You take so you can be taken from. It's a game about circles and cycles, worlds, and the circular nature of life and time. Last but not least, let me touch on the music and sound design of the game, because each environment has its own feel thanks to how it sounds, not just how it looks. The music in Cocoon is ethereal, alien, and transitory. There's a lot of low hums and bright noises layered over top. Usually an area begins with a boastful introductory song that plays as you enter, followed by the ever-present but inoffensive ambient noises of the world. The little tapping of your feet as you walk around, the clicks and hums of other creatures, the dull grinding gears of clockwork contraptions that move all around you, and a few echoey, shimmery, metallic chimes that seem to come from the heart of the world. To select a few tracks from the game as an illustration, one track, which I hope I'm correctly identifying as Dyson Door Tel EQ00, almost sounds like wind is blowing through an abandoned factory, where pipes are hummed over by an unthinking breeze that also moves through hanging sheets of metal like chimes. It has a feeling of an unnatural world singing in unison as nature, very briefly, moves through it. Much like how in the game, the strange natural life springs up, around, and out of the mechanical pieces of the world, becoming one. I also enjoyed Journey TRA credits. It feels like a song that's meant to capture the feeling of traveling through the internet superhighway at the speed of light in like a late 90s animation that tells kids how the internet works. Give it a listen. And lastly, Orbot Walk. Weird, awkward top notes echo as the orb-bearing bot that you guide in the game staggers and walks behind you. It's a very fitting track for the strange sensation of controlling another independent creature's movements. All these tracks fit together like pieces of a greater puzzle of the game. It fills it with this sublime sense of the familiar and ultimately the strange. So, in closing, I would recommend Cocoon to so many people. First off, let me say that my dad actually recommended this game to me many, many months ago when he read an article on Yahoo about it, so it is quite the reach when it comes to its audience. As for the folks I'd personally recommend this to, puzzle fans definitely gotta play Cocoon. So good. But also, if you're a fan of environmental storytelling or lore, if you're a completionist or an achievement hunter, a fan of experimental music, people who enjoy engaging boss fights, and honestly, folks who like playing games with other people, because I feel like it would be so much fun to solve these puzzles with somebody else in case you're not really able to figure things out yourself. So really, I would recommend this game to anyone. Cocoon was one of the best puzzle games I've ever played. It was truly rewarding in every way. The progression was well paced and every element seemed to build upon the last. It's been a while since I've played a puzzle game, but now I'm really in the mood to play more. So I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite puzzle game? Or what is a strong memory you have of a puzzle in a different genre that has stuck out to you as like your favorite, or at least the most memorable? If you'd like to respond, you have a few options. You can respond to the tweet that I'm going to tweet out, or you can tweet directly at Games in the Glade on Twitter using the GITG Asks hashtag. Or if you're listening to this on YouTube, you can leave a comment below the video. That's all I have for you today. There will be more news and reviews soon in what will be the last episode of Games in the Glade for now. With my family responsibilities as they are, I can't really guarantee future episodes, so I'm going to retire the show's Patreon page. I want to thank you all so very much for all the support you've shown through these years. Listening to the podcast, writing in your answers to each episode's questions, watching the playthroughs, and sharing the podcast with your friends. It's been such a rewarding endeavor, and your support has truly blown me away. I do, however, want to put the podcast to bed, as one does to their gardens in the winter, while the other avenues of my life take precedence. But I do want to thank Puddles of Infinity for the use of their song Porches and Universes, and Titsay, thank you so much for the beautiful album art. I want to thank everyone who has supported the podcast over on Patreon through the years, so thank you very much to Epiphone SJ15, Atlas9, Smee Keeper, Kineas, Just a Game Hero, Clamp, Harmless Iterator, Molly Olive aka Good Vibes, Wolfgang Sandwich, Quantum Witcher, Lashoya Dutt, Slurm316, and Chain Snake. Thank you all so much for supporting the podcast. And even though our time together is coming to an end, you can always find your way back here, my world-worn weary friend. There's a spot here in the clearing, in the quietude and shade, for you to relax a while and listen to Games in the Glade.